He will also wish to test his subordinates and learn their expertise before offering them more challenging tasks. He favors the left side, so the attack will most likely come from that direction. Pharaoh looked up at the viewport. The mist hunter was off the fire drake's port side, so that was presumably Savit's chosen surrogate attacker. The first attack will be ion cannons. Savit prefers to begin cautiously, and will also bow to the qualms and uncertainties of those who wish to disable the Chimera without permanent damage. Your defense will be your own ion cannons. Ion cannons! Target the Mist Hunter's ion launchers, Pharaoh called. As soon as they launch their volley, launch one in return. Acknowledged, Commodore. Pharaoh squeezed the data pad a little tighter. Like Thrawn's earlier slingshot trick, this one also had solid science beneath it. On the other hand, she'd never heard of anyone countering an ion cannon burst with one of their own. Of course, part of that was most defenders wouldn't know when or from where an ion attack would be launched, and would therefore not have enough time to aim and respond. In this case, the from where had been provided by Thrawn. If he was right. And that was the real question. There were a handful of high-ranking officers, Pharaoh knew, who fancied themselves amateur artists, and others who maintained extensive collections of religious art. Give Thrawn an hour in their showrooms, and Pharaoh had no doubt he could take them apart piece by piece if he had to. But Savit had no such artistic leanings. She'd heard he wrote music, but music had never been part of Thrawn's unique talent. On the other hand, Savit's family owned a large collection of art. If there were some pieces that Savit had particularly liked, some that he'd perhaps kept in his own suite in the family mansion, and if Thrawn had somehow been able to get a list of those artworks, maybe that would be enough. Ion bursts! Hammerly snapped. 6 shots from the Mist Hunter! Counterbursts launched! Pyrone snapped back. Running through! Pharaoh held her breath as she watched the 2 sets of ion bursts closing on each other. The leading edges of the bursts intersected, and as the containment fields crossed and annihilated each other, the suddenly released ions exploded outward in a spectacular fireworks display. Someone in the portside crew pit huffed out a startled-sounding oath. Agreed, Pharaoh called back. If the first salvo fails, there will be a second, and most likely a third attempt. Both will be more intense. Your probable defense against them. Second attack is imminent, Pharaoh said. And if it gets through, it won't be just you. We all may very well be damned. So stay sharp. Fire! Savit ordered. His voice holds command. His face and body language hold disbelief and growing anger. His fingers and hands move to his left, their stiffness holding impotence. The Chimera's ion blasts fly to meet the Mist Hunter's attack. The gunners are quicker this time, and the ion blast mutual destruction takes place closer to the Mist Hunter. Again! Savit ordered. His fingers again twitch left and forward, holding more energy and will. His body stance holds fresh determination. Mist Hunter fires more ion bursts. All but one is destroyed by the Chimera's answering burst. The remaining shot runs wide and misses its target. Again! Savit ordered. Make it work, Rascal, damn it! His fingers twitch now to his right. Stormbird, why are you just sitting there? 4 ion cannon spread, now! Yes, sir, Lockery said. His voice was tension, possibly disbelief that the attacks are failing, possibly concern for his Admiral State's mind. Savit's fingers point right, then point ahead. Enough is enough, he said. His voice holds anger and determination. Lockery, prep a squadron of TIEs. Continue with ion cannon fire. I'll tell you when to launch. The hand still holding Assistant Director Ronin's arm twists a few degrees, eliciting a momentary spasm of discomfort in the Assistant Director's face. Let's see how bloody Commodore Pharaoh is prepared to get. The second or third ion attack will include volleys from the ship on Savit's right flank, as well as the one on his left. He himself will not yet join in the attacks. Ion volley from Mist Hunter, Hammerly reported. Countering, Pyrone confirmed. Ion bursts. Second volley from Stormbird, Hammerly cut in. And there was no way the Chimera's own ion cannons could intercept both salvos. Pharaoh knew it, and presumably so did Savit. Fortunately, Thrawn had anticipated this one too. "Quat!" she called. "On it, Commodore," the TIE commander said briskly. "Left flanked on intercept vectors." Pharaoh watched, again feeling the itching sense of uncertainty. Theoretically, TIE fighters should be able to survive the same intensity of ion blast that could disable sizable sectors of capital ships. But Thrawn's projected scenario involved running the fighters through multiple hits. If the charge from the latter bursts leaked through the outer shell instead of bleeding off into space, the pilots could suddenly find that all of the electronics in their vac suits had been fried, as well as the systems in the fighters themselves. Pharaoh had tried to cover for that by putting an extra oxygen bottle in each cockpit, emergency supplies that could be screwed into the suit's intake without relying on the usual mixers or scrubbers. But if enough charge got through the shell and the suit to stun or paralyze the pilot, even that backup would be useless. The portside TIEs were nearly in position now, angling hard across the path of the Stormbird's ion volley. Fortunately, the Mist Hunter, unlike the Stormbird, hadn't pulled ahead of Savit's Firetrek, but had instead stayed behind the flagship's position. That meant a longer travel time for the 6 ion bursts it had sent toward the Chimera, which gave the 6 TIEs on that front enough time to move into intercept positions. Pharaoh held her breath. The timing was perfect. The TIEs swept squarely into the ion volley, intercepting 5 of the bursts full on, and catching the 6th a glancing blow. The bolts splashed into the fighter's spears and wings like ocean waves before scattering and dissipating, while the 6th burst managed to hold together for another 100 meters before it too disintegrated. Pharaoh threw a quick look at the status pages, confirming that the systems of all 6 TIEs had been completely shut down by the massive electrical jolts. All of their systems, including the comms and bio readouts. Until one or the other of those came back up, there would be no way to know if the pilots were alive or dead. But there was nothing Pharaoh could do about that. The Chimera's own ion burst had again intercepted and neutralized those from the Mist Hunter, but Savit was unlikely to give up now. There will be a final ion attack from the 2 ships. Having seen one flank of TIEs disabled, Savit will attempt the same attack in the hope of disabling the other flank. "Starboard TIEs, go!" Pharaoh ordered. "Right flank TIEs, acknowledged," Quack confirmed. Pharaoh turned back to the viewport. Even as the freshly blasted TIEs from the Chimera's portside group continued their unpowered flight across the combat field toward Pharaoh's right, the starboard TIEs crisscrossed past them, heading toward the Chimera's portside and the original sentry positions of the now neutralized TIEs. "Cannons and tractors, stand ready," Pharaoh warned. Savit was playing according to Thrawn's expectations. He would now attempt to neutralize the rest of Pharaoh's Marg Sable sentries. Sure enough, even as the starboard TIEs raced past the Chimera's nose, heading for their new portside positions, the Mist Hunter and Stormbird again opened up with the now familiar ion volleys. He will assume you will use the same defense against this attack. Instead, you will counter by... "Cannons firing," Tyrone called. "Tractors locked." Ahead, the Chimera's TIEs continued their race to portside, toward the bolts now arrowing in from the Stormbird. Just as the Chimera's own ion cannon burst met and disintegrated that salvo, leaving the TIEs untouched. Pharaoh shifted her attention to the volley coming from the Mist Hunter, toward the Chimera's starboard side. The drifting, lifeless TIEs moving in that direction abruptly sped up, their vectors angling now toward the Chimera as Tyrondi's tractors grabbed them and reeled them in. The Mist Hunter's ion bursts were nearly there. The TIEs were still angling in toward them, and with another multiple splash of ionic energy, the TIEs slammed across the bolts, dissipating their energy. "Roll starboard," Pharaoh snapped. Countless TIEs were careening on their new tractor-driven vectors straight toward the Chimera's starboard wing, and shot past, without impacting the hull, as Agral rolled the ship, dipping that side of the wedge out of their way. Pharaoh felt her lips